All right. Thank you, everybody. I hope everybody's enjoying the show. Today I'm going to talk about a little short film project that we did in conjunction with Sony R&D called Killians game. It's actually technically part of the group called the Sony Content Technology Strategy Committee, which is a group within Sony R&D Global. And we decided to fund a short film project. And let me go ahead and see if this little slide thing goes, or could you... There we go, one more. So see a little trailer of the short.
Looks like you're going out of town for a while.
Maybe I'm paranoid.
Makes sense that you would be.
I helped him reinvent himself. I helped him manage all of that money. And I believed him when he said it was over.
It's never that simple.
Clearly not. Sylvia Torres. We haven't had much time to make a proper introduction.
Killian.
So that was a trailer, and let's talk about kind of the key technology objectives. There were three major objectives. The first was basically to serve as a kind of filmmaking 101 for the R&D team. Within Sony, we have several R&D teams, super smart. They come up with a lot of great ideas and concepts. However, there was a need or kind of a desire to get them more focused on how to create technologies that could be used on production. And so we thought the best way to do this would be to have this short film project, get them exposed to all the aspects of production, treat this production kind of like a full-length feature production. So concept, script, storyboard, pre-production planning. So we really kind of cataloged and recorded all of these aspects. And basically, for the second key objective, all this data was then captured so that way it could be referenced later on and also be reused in any other types of kind of technology analysis, whether it be AI, machine learning upscaling, or some kind of VFX enhancement after the fact. I'm just kind of spitballing on ideas here, but this really was intended to be this kind of catalog and archive of data that the engineers could also use going forward, and that we could also use to present at shows like this. And lastly, the third area was just to test some new technologies, both Sony technologies and technologies that are hot in the marketplace right now. Those being, and if we can go next slide, please. I guess, there we go. The Venice 2 camera, which we were able to get a pre-production unit of and shoot with this. And so that helped us prove out the workflow and actually use this information for our regular productions to use, which are starting to shoot Venice 2 now. And thank you. The Sony AirPeak drone, which was also a pre-production unit that we used on set, and it enabled us to get the aerial shots that you saw in the trailer of the car, and it allowed us to be able to also understand and learn how to match the two Sony cameras. So we shot a smaller Sony A7S camera on the on the AirPeak, and we're able to match that to the Venice 2. Next, please. The Sony Xperia Phone Pro, that actually has an interesting feature, which is an HDMI in, and it's 5G. So we were able to use that to actually remote stream our cameras on set to Japan. And so they were able to monitor everything that we were doing in real time and vice versa. And I'll get in a little more about that later on in the presentation. And the other big area was virtual production. So using the Sony Crystal LED wall panels and our Sony stage in Japan, known as PCL, we were able to employ that technology. And I'll get into more detail around that now. Next, please. So virtual production, one more. So like I said, there were a couple of groups involved with this project, one being the studio in the US in Culver City. And so we decided to set up the production there. But the second group was in Japan, the unit called PCL, or Photochemical Lab. I know it's a really relevant term in the virtual production space. But they have a virtual production stage, and so we wanted to partner with them. The only thing is, at the time of the production and this project, we had a little thing known as the pandemic, COVID, kind of threw a monkey wrench into travel either way. So we couldn't travel to Japan to work with them directly, and they couldn't travel to us to actually see the production in person. So this kind of influenced the aspect of the project itself. And so what we decided to do is, how could we shoot something and scan that location and then sort of virtually ship it over to Japan so they could actually shoot some additional scenes and do it in such a way that the audience would be none the wiser. So we really wanted virtual production to be really transparent in this and not be visible in terms of something super science fiction-y or special effects driven. Next, please. And so what we did is we shot in a practical location called the Paramore Estate in Silver Lake, and we scanned that room using a LiDAR scanner as well as not necessarily photogrammetry. We took several pictures, or several thousand pictures, for texture mapping. Next, please. And so we used this information to create our virtual asset. We partnered with a VFX company called FuseFX. They were able to take all this data and build an asset. And it wasn't a process in which we used LiDAR and photogrammetry to actually just build the asset and use that. They actually built the asset from scratch. They used the LiDAR point clouds as a reference and the photogrammetry to texture those areas. And the reason why we took this approach was because there's a lot of furniture and elements in the room that we wanted to be able to have full control of and be able to move around and do some cheats, if you will, from the virtual production standpoint. So we felt this was the best way to go forward. Next, please. And so in order to allow the teams to collaborate, we used a combination of things. Like I said, on set, we used the Sony Xperia Pro 5G phones and a service called Meetmo. That was a live stream. So we live streamed the main camera. We also live streamed several witness cams. So the folks in Japan could see everything that was going on and ask questions if they even wanted to. And when it came time for them to shoot virtual production on their set, we were able to tune in, if you will, and also give feedback. We had the directors in the US being able to actually give feedback on certain shots as well. And throughout the process, we used Teams. It's our corporate collaboration platform, and actually it worked really well, surprisingly, for what it was. So we were able to collaborate using that. Next, please. And then a little bit about the Sony PCL stage. So it's in Tokyo, just outside the central part of Tokyo there. And this is just kind of an elevation. I'm just giving you an idea of the size. I don't have specifics on the actual dimensions. Well, there's some dimensions here, so 450 feet wide, not including the curve. But it essentially is a new stage that they just set up for, not necessarily for Killians game, but just in time to be able to shoot Killians game on it using the latest Sony C-LED B series panels. Next, please. And as you can see, right there on the right, we have the real location, which was the Paramore Estate, like I mentioned. And on the left there, the virtual set. And you can see how closely it matched. It was interesting to view it remotely because we felt like we were back in Silver Lake where we shot the actual location. But they did a good job lighting it and blocking it. Next, please. And so I want to play a little behind the scenes on just the virtual production piece. So if you just hit next, it should play automatically.
So one of the biggest things we wanted to test on this shoot was the brand new LED wall they built in Japan to recreate a set that we had actually shot on in real life here in the States.
So you get to the desk, you're pulling out the letter and you're reacting. That's kind of the moment there.
Today we're filming on set, and then they're going to scan the set that we've just worked on. That's going to go to FuseFX.
We start by receiving a LiDAR scan of the location. We take that into our VFX pipeline at FuseFX, and we convert that into a virtual environment, which then we can provide to the team in Japan, and they're able to shoot with that virtual environment on their LED volume.
The communication was very important and key, and we've always talked with FuseFX and Sailor team to make sure the color is correct.
So for today, just talking about the creative, how it looks, see if we're in the ballpark for lighting and the fire sequence, and if there's anything else we want to change before we start sending files your way later this week.
One of the things that was interesting about writing for the LED wall is we sort of wrote carefully. We didn't want to push the boundaries too much because we weren't sure exactly how it was going to respond. And we found that when they did the actual shoot, some of the things that we were careful about, they could actually achieve at a much higher level than what we were expecting. So next time we approach a project like this, we'll kind of know, you really can get away with a lot more than you think.
And so that was the behind the scenes for VFX portion. I'll have a link later on. You can see the entire BTS portion online, as well as the entire short if you're interested in checking that out. But what I'd like to do next is go through a little bit of kind of shot breakdowns, just to kind of walk you through what we did from a virtual production standpoint. So we can go to the next slide, please. And so I'm not going to go through every single scene, but I'm going to go through some kind of key scenes. So as you can see, we went through a whole storyboard process and an actual production, virtual production planning process. And this first one isn't super elaborate. It doesn't involve the Unreal asset at all, but really it was our establishing shot. So we wanted to create kind of a cell, if you will, to kind of make the audience believe that these characters, these actors are actually in the physical location of Los Angeles. And so what we did is we, outside the Paramore State, you can see right there in the lower left, we did some plate shots. And so we did a plate shot looking out at the sky, and we did another reverse angle looking at the actual mansion itself. And so we just shot these with the Venice 2 camera, and then they used the stills, or a still frame from each shot as the background. And we got some input from the folks in Japan and gave them the feedback as to how high the camera was, what the focal length of the lens was, and they were able to use that to kind of map out their shots on the physical stage. And you can kind of see in the middle here the results of the test. And I've got a clip, if you can go next. This is the actual plate shot itself. Right before we shot it, but just to give you an idea of how we captured it, we put the actors in the frame for reference, or these crew in the frame for reference, and we shot a color chart. So that way it allowed us to color correct and adjust color to match when they were on the virtual production stage. So next, please. And so the next scene, we've got our bad guys, if you will, having to enter into the room. And so this is kind of a wide shot, and it's going to be showing the kind of three walls of the room, and basically the camera's going to follow them in. And so this was shot using the Unreal shot. You can see the storyboard, master form entry, dolly pushes into two-shot, masked men stop in the middle. And so you can see what they did in terms of planning the shot out and actually diagramming out where in the layout of the room where the LED wall would be virtually. And they even tested it, as you can see from the video there. And the next slide will show you the camera move that they did. This is a virtual camera move recorded by the PCL team. But that's essentially the camera move that they did in Unreal using Moses tracking to track the camera and basically follow our bad guys into the room. The next scene involved one of the bad guys coming around a table and kind of walking to the side. And you can see now they've rotated the LED wall to reflect kind of that other corner of the room there. And so you can see kind of the shot, and the team in Japan did a really great job of kind of mapping everything out and detailing everything they did. And like I said, we had both a virtual and actual desk over in Japan. So we actually were able to find some pieces that we could send to Japan for actual physical props to help also with the cheat and sell to the audience that they could be in this actual physical room. And so depending on where the wall was, so here the table was real, but in other shots, the table was actually virtual and behind the LED wall. So they did little techniques like that and mapped everything out to help kind of, like I said, sell and convince the audience that these folks are in the same room for all intents and purposes. And if you go to the next shot, you'll see the camera move for that. And interesting enough, it doesn't look as great here as it did in camera because of the bokeh and out of focus aspect of it. But the curtains were actually pretty convincing for them actually creating those from scratch. So we were really impressed with the curtains and how they did the exterior shots as well. All right, so the last shot I wanted to kind of do a walkthrough of was our exit. So bad guys weren't able to find what they're looking for. So now they've got to exit, but they also want to leave no trace behind of any other evidence that could be there. And so this entailed fire. And it was interesting. It wasn't in the original script. The folks in Japan, we had a really great creative director in Japan that came up with this idea. It would be really cool if we have this virtual asset and we could burn it down. And so we had vETC look into like, okay, well, how can we do that convincingly? And so they did these fire effects, which you can kind of see right here on the floor. And then they used the combination of the fire effects and some actual practical lighting in front of the actors to make it look like they were burning the place down. And as you can see here, just like to reference what I said earlier, now the desk is virtual in that shot when they're walking out. And if you can go ahead and do the next one, you'll see kind of the pullout with the fires. We had a lot of back and forth on this shot just to try to adjust the intensity. It looked really, really intense at first, and we were like, let's dial it back just a little bit, just because it didn't look very convincing at first. But we were able to get to something that we felt was really convincing creatively. And yeah, so these are the kind of the shot walkthroughs I wanted to go through. And kind of to bring it all together, if you go next, I'd like to show you the end results. So this is the kind of the last 3 or 4 minutes of the short. So you will see they're going to start in the actual physical room. So it'll be our 2 main characters. And then when the bad guys come in, that's pretty much all going to be the virtual production aspect. So if you go ahead and hit next, it'll roll.
It's never that simple.
Clearly not.
I really am sorry about your loss. Maybe you ought to leave tonight, considering everything.
Maybe you're right. Good luck, Mr. Thompson. Whatever's in there and wherever it takes you, I hope I never see you again.
I understand.
And pay attention to those glasses, because you'll see something pretty soon.
It was time to leave. I knew it, and so did she. She left that night, and just in time. They came the next day.
俺がな誰かチン殺しやがったんか分かんねえ机の中見てみましょうよあそこありますよキリアンの野郎シルビアに会うたんかもしれんな 後悔させてやりましょうよ。今よりもっと。おやしまえ。
They knew what I knew, but they didn't know what Nico knew. Only I did.
So I hope that was convincing. Usually we like to show the short before we kind of reveal the secret. But for this audience, I figured we'd start with the virtual production piece. If you wanted to see the short in its entirety, you can scan that QR code. Also, just search for Killians game on YouTube, and it'll come up. Also, within the links of the short, there'll be a link to the BTS portion. So you can also see the BTS portion in its entirety. A couple of things about that last sequence, because there's kind of a lot to unpack there. So, like I said, the glasses and the stuff on the desk were actually physical props. So we sent those to Japan for them to use to help make everything more convincing. We also did some insert shots. So the shot where he's opening the drawers, those hands are shot in Hollywood, Silver Lake, with our actors there wearing gloves. So there was a lot of planning to coordinate kind of the outfits, the gloves, the wardrobe, and everything. And then also the actual glass breaking was shot in Culver City, as was the fire, the real fire igniting, also shot in Culver City. So there was a lot of insert shots that were done to help kind of sell this this kind of cheat, if you will. And so in terms of the asset itself, it was built using Unreal Engine 426. And like I said, we had a little bit of a back and forth just to optimize it for the stage and PCL for them to be able to use the asset efficiently. But other than that, I don't know if there's any questions before we actually go through the walkthrough.
Any questions? Oh, I got one over here. Just one sec.
What was the pitch? What was the pitch of the wall?
I think it's 1.2, correct?
Yeah, 1.2. Yeah, if we can pull up the virtual production asset itself. And so this is the actual asset upgraded for, is it Unreal 5 now? 427. So we went from 426 to 427. You can see the fresh drum right here. And yeah, so this was the asset that FuseFX built. They actually were able to do some roto on the stuff outside to basically add a little bit of parallax to a 2D shot that of the trees outside. So when you moved around, it still gave you a little bit of feeling. It wasn't just kind of a static window. Like I said, they digitally made the curtains and all of the furniture from scratch, used the photo portions to basically create the textures for both the room. And we also realized, just because we didn't have enough compute, that and it actually worked out with the story, that we needed to drape some of the furniture as well. So that's why some of the furniture, and we kind of threw a little tidbit in there that the main actress or the main character was in the process of moving. So we draped a lot of the furniture as well to help with our kind of bit budget, if you will, for the asset. But any questions on the asset itself? All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show.